What is up, guys? Welcome to Truth and Transparency. Good evening. Come on in, settle up, saddle up, settle, do whatever you want.
Listen, folks, I know there's a history here. I'd like to get this hearing in today. You know, everybody needs to just focus on the relevant facts, okay? I know there's a history here.
Are you talking up by Sunset Mart? Up the hill by the gas station?
Yeah.
Okay. Why did you... All right, who's responsible here?
What's that?
Who's responsible here? Whose house is this?
Yeah, haven't been drinking or anything, right?
No.
Okay, drive careful, okay?
Will do, thank you.
All right, guys, what is up? Welcome. You're gonna take us back to, let's see, May 3rd. It could probably even go back a little bit further. March 27th, March 28th. March 7th of 2023 is when we started seeing all of the filings come out, where all of the redacted material that has to do with the search warrants. We got to see those redacted stuff. So I'm going to point out how Ann Taylor and company has kept every damn word. Everything that they've put together, they've kept their word where we're at today. So let's see. Is Miss Potts okay? The fork throwing? All right. Let's talk about, do you guys know that Brian Culver's DNA was taken both in Pennsylvania and then in Idaho? They swabbed him. So in the suppression, all the filings with the suppression here, let's take a look at Brian Culver's person in Pennsylvania. Oh, we good? Good. All right, so right here, this is that filing here. PA search. So right here at 4 a.m., at 4:10, FBI agent searched Mr. Culver's person, took his fingerprints, took pictures of his body, and a DNA swab was taken from him. So the feds got that, you know, because the feds like to keep the stuff that they collect during investigations separate, you know. They might print ship a report or whatever, but I'm curious to see how this would have all worked. So what happened there? The feds swabbed him up, and then we look at Idaho, BK person in on January 5th, when he's back in Idaho. Sergeant Blaker, based off his, he requested a search warrant for Mr. Culver person, relying upon the same facts articulated above for the warrants used in Pennsylvania. Later that day, Mr. Culver's person was searched, so pictures of his body, his fingerprints, and a DNA swab taken. And this was by members of the Idaho and federal law enforcement at the Latah County Jail. So I'm not a lawyer, so you'd have to ask a lawyer, hey, is that like, they swabbed him in PA and then they swabbed him in Idaho. Just curious as to why. Why? I'm just curious. I'm curious as to why. Now, let's talk about this May 3rd, 2023. This was a defendant's third supplemental request for discovery. Okay, now remember Brian Kohlberger's team, they think that, hey man, we're going to go have a preliminary hearing, right? Okay. So I believe that Ann Taylor held back some stuff that she was asking for in her supplemental request because she didn't want to let the prosecutors know that she knew that they used IgG. Just my thoughts. I have no idea if that's true. Kind of just what I thought based on reviewing all the material. We find out on April 24th that they bring in attorney generals to basically come and save Bill Thompson's ass, and they're going to, prosecute this case with him. I think that's when I dubbed him Backseat Bill. Take a seat, Bill. Get your ass in the back. Anyways, so in this third supplemental request for discovery, this is when Ann Taylor's like, all right, well, now I want to make it known, and we're asking for all of this DNA shit. We're going to get to the bottom of this shit, all right? So chain of custody, profiles uploaded to a DNA database, data files, statistical calculations, and here we go. And I have not followed the Lake and Riley case at all, except just recently wanted to catch some of the testimony from a lot of the feds that have been testifying in that case. Okay. And so, I went and I started printing out, basically, I wanted to compare some suppression motions that were filed in that case to this case. As well as they did something interesting with the DNA. They went and got TrueAllele to company. Let me see the motion I want to show you guys. Okay. All right, so this was the defendant seeks to exclude evidence and expert testimony concerning DNA evidence the state seeks to introduce at trial, and it has to do with this TrueAllele. Here it is. TrueAllele is amazing with separating mixture DNAs. So like if you have a mixture, which you would have a lot of with like blood at a crime scene that has a lot of blood, you can have a mixture. You have mixtures. And TrueAllele, one of their claim to fame is that we can separate that and get you some profiles. And I'm like, why didn't Richard Allen get to have this opportunity? So here we come to the Idaho4 case, which is 4 stabbed students. Okay. A lot of blood. They said it's the bloodiest scene they've ever seen, right? You're going to have a knife that they're saying one knife was used on all 4 victims. And so there's going to be a lot of transfer that you would think, and I would think that you'd be able to tell which victim was stabbed first because they don't have that transfer blood. If you stab me first, you're taking my blood to victim 2, then now you're going to take victim 1 and victim 2 to victim 3. Okay. And then you're going to take victim 3, 2, and 1 to victim 4. So I shouldn't have victim 4 blood anywhere mixed into mine because I was killed first. All right. So TrueAllele. So the DNA evidence in this case was developed via the TrueAllele casework software. This is the case that's going on right now that you can see on court TV or law and crime. TrueAllele is designed to extract and identify an individual's DNA. Let me make this bigger and clearer because this is just not up to snuff. And you don't have to know anything about the case. I just want to show you guys what they had to do in this case, or what they chose, to do. Let's see. Okay. So Cybergenetics Inc. owns the TrueAllele software. Turning to the question of qualification. Okay. So basically the defendant was trying to get this thrown out because the reason that they want this thrown out is because without TrueAllele, they weren't able to get a profile. So I was reading about this and I'm like, wow, okay. So Jennifer, she has testified in 57 cases and has been qualified as an expert in DNA interpretation in all 57 cases. Jennifer is extremely familiar TrueAllele and testified during the hearing on how the software works to identify individuals from DNA samples. Defendant does not dispute Jennifer's qualifications. Okay. Jennifer is qualified to testify as an expert in DNA interpretation and in the use of TrueAllele. Special Agent Ashley Hinkle, she's with the FBI, has been a forensic biologist with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation for over 18 years. The state and defendant have stipulated that Agent Hinkle is qualified to testify as an expert. The court notes for the record that Agent Hinkle has conducted DNA testing between 400 and 500 times and has been qualified as an expert in at least 300 cases. Curious why not the other 200. Agent Hinkle has used TrueAllele 60 times, and she performed the DNA testing in this case using TrueAllele. Agent Hinkle is a qualified expert. Turning to its reliability, all right? So Jennifer stated that TrueAllele is based on 30-year-old science. There have been at least 8 validated peer-reviewed studies that tested the efficiency of TrueAllele, and the software coding was made available for review. TrueAllele has proven to not only be much faster than human DNA testing, okay, but it is also superior than human DNA testing when it comes to identifying human DNA from single and mixed DNA samples. So again, the reason that this is interesting for me is because the human testing in that case in Georgia right now, they could not get the profile. But with TrueAllele, they could get a profile. So then I just think about the Richard Allen case. And I'm like, geez, that's all I kept hearing is that we had these mixtures and I couldn't get a DNA profile. I couldn't get a DNA profile. It could be one of the victims plus 2 or 3 other people. And so then we go to Ann Taylor and what she asked back in the day. Okay. Now look at this. Here we go. Look at number 8. Validation summaries. Please provide a copy of validation summaries for internal validation studies undertaken and establish the interpretation guidelines relied upon in this case, including studies that address, and she's, listing all these things. Right there, she says, peak detection threshold. And she says, interpretation of mixed samples. Please include validation summaries for any, this is the probability, genotyping program used. In the event that an enhanced detection method was used in this case, please provide a copy of the validation summary for said method. And I believe that Ann Taylor was asking there, basically, did you guys use like a TrueAllele? I mean, that's what that's telling me. I didn't know that back, reading this, right? But we always try to like get smarter or learn something. And so I'm over here like, wait, I swear I remember Ann Taylor writing up a motion when she was asking for things with this DNA, and then she goes into genetic genealogy as well. But this is stuff that they were asking for so long ago, okay? And they kept on getting, the defense kept on getting screwed with in a way that it was just like, why aren't you giving us this shit if you have it, right? Because now we know the timeline because of where we're at in the case, that when you look back and it's like, how did you not, you would have known this, then. And when we just hear about who's delaying shit and why is this being delayed, okay? Ann Taylor was asking and has continued to ask for discovery in this case over and over and over. And so it's really frustrating when people say that the defense is dragging their feet, because it's just not. They're just not. And then they get answers to questions that say, like, we don't have that, or that doesn't exist. And then we find out that it does exist. Okay. We find out that Bill Thompson thinks that he can say things because stuff is in a Dropbox somewhere and hasn't been opened. Okay. Like Brian Colbert, does it exist that there's body camera of you arresting this man? How is there no body camera of this? Remember, Ann Taylor was asking for that type of stuff back then. When I say back then, I'm talking about 2023, from the moment that she started putting discovery requests in, then January of 2023, all the way, and she continues to today. So again, this is the judge's order, by the way, about TrueAllele in the case that's happening right now. And so, right, TrueAllele is currently being used in at least 10 crime labs across the country. And so I'm over here like, hey, what crime labs are using TrueAllele? Like, I'm just curious, because I can tell you that Indiana is not using TrueAllele. Okay, they don't. They're in 1960s over there. But TrueAllele has been used in various countries to identify victims of mass casualty events. Defendant does not dispute the reliability of TrueAllele, and the software's record demonstrates its reliability. So in a nutshell here, order denying defendant's motion in limine to exclude evidence and expert opinion with that DNA. So why isn't TrueAllele being used? Do we think that it was used in this case? Do we think that TrueAllele was used in this case? And then also, why wouldn't people use TrueAllele? Like, why isn't it getting picked up if it's, reliable, and it's able to take a case like the Idaho4 case where you would have you would think a lot of mixtures. Why wouldn't it be something that was done? So curious about that. Now, going back to Ann Taylor's already on it. She wants to know about the lab personnel back then. And then here we go. This is when we first get our first look at Ann Taylor wants to know about the genetic genealogy testing and search. So this was back. She knew about it. She wanted to keep it hush hush, in my opinion. And then once they already indicted Brian Koberger, then Ann Taylor came swinging with, okay, well, we can let the cat out the bag now. Okay. So the genetic genealogy testing came from a May 2023 defendant's third supplemental request for discovery. And looking back at what Ann Taylor wanted, she wanted all the reports generated by any lab that conducted SNP testing on any sample in this case, including from samples where unknown males, not the defendant, were identified. And this is where we find out, this is when the first time I started talking about it, I'm like, okay, we have some unidentified male DNA that is not Brian Kohlberger's. Okay, like she's asking for this stuff in a supplemental request. You're not asking for this stuff if you don't know that it exists. And remember, this is where, what's his name? Bill Thompson. It doesn't exist. We don't have it. So just to set the record straight, in a quad homicide of 4 stabbed students, 3 unidentified male DNAs were not treated the same way as the profile that was a partial pulled off of a sheath. They didn't even do anything with this. They put it through CODIS, no hit. Right? Because it didn't match Brian Kohlberger's. Otherwise, they would have been like, oh, they can't say it's unknown. Then they would have assigned it to Brian Kohlberger. So it's not his, right? Right. So she's asking for all this shit back then. She wants all documents related to the comparison of any DNA samples collected during the genealogy investigation to crime scene evidence. You think she got that? No. Remember, she didn't get any of this. Why? How do I know that? Well, because the next day after she puts this in, because this is when the bombshells come out that, holy shit. Well, Ann Taylor then files the next day on May 4th, right here, May 4th. This is her motion to compel discovery. And this is when she's letting us know that, hey, we have all these numbers that we've labeled as our requests. And so here's what we do not have. And we need to have a hearing here because your judge is going to tell the prosecutor to turn this shit over. Right? And right here, so all body cam and dash cam footage from officers involved in the search and arrest of Brian Kohlberger in Pennsylvania. Well, what do we find out, guys? That doesn't exist, right? Because why would we ever have any of that documented? Why was she asking for it back then? Because it's that important. Where can we find all that information out now? In the suppression hearing, or the suppression motions. Next thing she wanted for the third, this is for the motion to compel with the third one. Mr. Kohlberger requests an order for the state to disclose the following items included in the defendant's first supplemental request. So this is all from the first supplemental request here. Request number 49, all lab testing, including photographs and color diagram and bench notes, including but not limited to copies of lab reports detailing the forensic evidence collection and analysis of items recovered at Brian Kohlberger's parents' home, trash cans, and other receptacles in Brian Kohlberger's Hyundai Elantra. What's trying to be suppressed right now? Oh, everything to do with his parents' place, right? And the Elantra. Ann Taylor has maintained the consistency in this case that the state has not. This is nothing new, okay? So when people are like, oh my God, I'm so surprised, or why would Ann Taylor, who does this woman think she is to throw out all this shit or try to get all this evidence tossed? No. This has been a problem in this case since jump, okay? And Ann Taylor has made it known with her team that it's been a problem with all the secrecy surrounding how you guys got to Brian Kohlberger. As of May 4th, 2023, counsel for Mr. Kohlberger has not received the requested materials. And based upon information and belief, these reports contain, what's the word? Exculpatory information. Meaning his car, guess what? There ain't dick in it. This car was supposed to light up like a tree, Christmas tree. It has, there's nothing in that car. Wouldn't that be exculpatory to Mr. Kohlberger? Now here we're gonna get something that's good. They want the FBI forensic lab reports. We're gonna skip that for now. We're gonna go to, this is where we find out for the first time that Mr. Brian Kohlberger was interrogated. It tells us right here. Okay. So as of May 4th, like, how does the defense, they were supposed to have a preliminary hearing. And May 4th, they didn't have, as of May 4th, they were supposed to have a preliminary hearing in June. As of May 4th, 2023, counsel for Mr. Kohlberger has not received recordings and notes from the interrogation of Mr. Kohlberger by Detective Payne. And how do we now know that Brian Kohlberger was, he talked to Moscow Police Department in Pennsylvania because of the suppression motions? They had all this. Why, like, where is it, right? Why, I mean, like, he was arrested December at the end of the month. So January, February, March, April, May 4th. Number 4, Mr. Kohlberger requests an order. Again, this is from supplemental number 1, supplemental cell number 1, request number 115. All police reports, audio, video evidence, and any recorded statements related to Brian Kohlberger's arrest and incarceration in Pennsylvania. Why? Because of Brian Enton and the bullshit. And what came out in the suppression? That Mr. Kohlberger said no such thing like, who else was arrested? You know, sit and spin right here. Like, why do you think she was requesting this? What came out in the suppression motions? Number 5, Mr. Kohlberger requests, again, this is from defendant's second supplemental, request number 161, which is all reports, notes, recordings, and photos that as of May 4th, 2023, counsel for Mr. Kohlberger has not received the requested material. And here, Ann Taylor was doing them a little favor and not even saying what 161 was. Okay. But believe that these materials contain exculpatory evidence. I personally believe that, you know what, I'll hang on to what I think that is. Number 6, Mr. Kohlberger requests, we want these training records of these specific officers. Why? Well, because they said things like, due to my training and experience, right? And then yada, yada, yada. Well, let's see what your training and experience is that you think that you can just write up these, what, search warrants? Write up, like, what are you talking about? So that happens that next day, May 4th. Then we have May 12th here, which is, this is how the state responded to defendant's third supplemental request for discovery. And the state is over here claiming that they are, hey, we are complying. We gave you the initial dump on January 23rd. Then we gave you a February 21st dump. Then we gave you a March 29th dump. And we're just going to keep on, you know. So this was their response here on May 12th. Their last time giving up discovery for May 12th when they wrote this was March 29th. Okay. And clearly Ann Taylor's writing stuff that has to do with, we're not even talking about my third and fourth requests here. We're still talking about, you haven't supplied me with stuff from the first and second. Okay. And here, come to find out, like, it's what's in all these suppression motions. That's how they answered that. Then defendant's second motion to compel discovery. That went out in June 15th. And this is when we got a little more of what Ann Taylor's like, all right, here we go again. You guys want to fuck around and find out. So this is what we don't have. Ooh. Oh, boom. Investigative reports and conclusions from all of the cell phone analysis, including but not limited to any analysis conducted by the policing agencies involved, FBI CAST team, or other Idaho authorities. What's in the suppression hearing? Or what's in the motions? Everything to do with what? AT&T first warrant, trap and trace, because they lied. The state has responded by listing page numbers and audio video file names of information and data provided to the defense in discovery. As of June 13, 2023, counsel for Mr. Kohlberger has not received any investigative reports and conclusions of the analysis of the data conducted by police agencies. It's because it doesn't exist. Suppression hearing. That's coming up. Request number 4, all footage provided to forensic examiners with the FBI used to identify the make and model of the vehicle. This is crazy, you guys. All reports generated related to the identification of the white Elantra. You know, was it 2011, 2016? So, I mean, what were you guys looking for? Again, they didn't know when the change in the year happened. I mean, none of this. Request 17. This was kept under wraps. That number. So it was 23. Oh, no, 23 wasn't. So here's where they found out that this request somehow they led, hey, here you go. And it was, you guys provided a recording and an in-person interview with the FBI agent rather than the phone interview done by Moscow police. So they found out that, oh, wait, we didn't even know this existed. Okay. So the state responded that they have discovered on this date. However, the provided recording is an in-person interview with the FBI agent rather than the phone interview done by Moscow police is what we were looking for. And they weren't being like, they're not saying what request 23 is. And I personally believe that this has something to do with the roommates, one of them. Request 109, identity of FBI special agent that is a member of the, CAST team that was consulted with to determine locations of the cell phone from. This is all on suppression. Because doesn't exist. I mean, they just made shit up. They did partial data. They made it so that the phone and this white Elantra was just in sequence driving in this big loop. Mr. Colbert, so the state objected to this request for the reason that this is outside the scope. You guys remember, that's why I'm showing us all this again, is Ann Taylor is like, we need the cast. Okay? We need the cast. Everything that you rely, like, and then look at what the state answers with. The state answers with, this is outside the scope. No, you guys are liars and you guys got caught. You guys got caught. And Hitler, I mean, all of these, like, these are exhibits, y'all. This is what Ann Taylor will be referring to is when we asked for this stuff, these are the answers that we got for them to try to hide their fuckerage. So the state objected to this request for the reasons that this is outside the scope. To the extent that the state intends to offer expert testimony, it will comply with ICR. So to the extent that the state intends to offer expert testimony, this is where the state is like, no, we're going to try to use Maori and Payne. Send that mofo, Maori, to go get some 3-week classes. Okay. You guys, this is so obvious to anybody that's been following this case from the beginning, in which it is a lot to follow, but Mr. Kohlberger disagrees, as this information was largely relied upon in various warrants. You guys see why the suppression is happening? In various warrants. And if this is not true, right, then your whole warrant is invalid and everything will go from that warrant. So Mr. Kohlberger disagrees, as the information was largely relied upon in various warrants, including the arrest warrant. That's where they got the DNA from, his DNA. Information relied upon to secure search and arrest warrants is necessary to conduct analysis of Fourth Amendment issues. And what do we see in everything? What are we seeing? Oh, the Fourth Amendment just comes up left and right in all this suppression. It's because they violated the shit out of his Fourth Amendment. Further, the entirety of the information could include materials required under Brady, because they know that the data doesn't match that little phone that Payne, or the car that Payne says takes this loop-de-loop. Number 6 is request 120 and 140. This is all tips received by law enforcement relating to this case. Now, think back now. Tips. The tip Brian Kohlberger. That's how they say they got to Brian Kohlberger, was, we received a tip. These people are sick, man. This shit is crazy. But here's Ann Taylor. Let's get all those tips. Where's just the tip with Brian Kohlberger? So the state has provided various tips throughout discovery. However, they are scattered in pieces throughout the discovery. A complete and chronological list of all tips has not been provided. Why didn't they want it to be in chronological order, which should not have been hard? Okay, because your emails are dated and everybody had to email their tips in, or, call, and then you have recordings of like those calls, like that they're time-stamped and dated. All right, they had so many officers on this case. Like, who was in charge of the tip? Just the tips. Who was in charge of just the tips? Okay. So, why do you think Ann Taylor wanted this chronological order of these tips? You want to know why? Because Ann Taylor was trying to get that date, baby. That date of that BK tip. She wanted that date. Where's this Brian Kohlberger name that you guys keep, you got this tip? Oh, the tip from the FBI that you guys were trying to hide, the IGG, right? But Ann Taylor was like, go ahead and give me this list in chronological order, and then we'll be able to see where this big BK tip came from. Request 136, all audio recordings related to all search warrants. Damn, why do you think they wanted this? Why do you think they wanted that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because in your suppression motions, they refer to having given me proof upon oath this day showing probable cause establishing grounds for issuing a search warrant. Yeah, we're going to have to hear all these because all of your stuff says proof upon audio, like, you know, words and shit. So what does Ann Taylor want and need? Ann Taylor needs, yeah, we're going to go ahead and need all the search warrants, the audio recordings of them. We want to know what this proof is. Okay. So request 136 is all audio recordings related to all search warrants obtained in this matter. And then why? Well, the state has responded that they are attempting to obtain this information. If it exists, it's in all of your fucking warrants. The state will comply with this request upon receipt. The defense has been provided with a photograph, of a DVD entered into evidence as item 435. This was just to show, like, y'all, come on. And guess what it says? It's labeled as SW audio, which stands for search warrant. With an S. There is also a notation that this DVD was copied to county on 1/13/2023. Just letting y'all know that it has existed since this time. We just happen to see a photograph of it. We need the disc. Okay? That you guys have been keeping from us. Request 164 is body cam recordings, notes, photographs, and all information collected at the autopsies by, oh my God, Tolson, Vargas, and Gunderson. All three of these people went to the autopsies. Well, this is how I found out about Gary Tolson, which led me to the Dr. Moore, Dr. Drake case. Vargas, this is who we found out is responsible for the Indian trail video, the 700 block video, the Ring camera. Somehow she just got that somehow. And Gunderson, well, he was one of the first responders, and he said that it was a very slow day, even though the K9 unit was just sent out 30 minutes before that for drugs. But it was just a slow Sunday. Sure. Okay. Awesome. So yeah, the state responded that they do not have these items in its possession. Clarification is needed. And guess what they said? We didn't take notes. We did not wear body cams. We did not take photographs. We did not take notes. We don't have any body cams. Nothing. Why were you three people there? What were you doing? But later it would come out to say, none of this exists. There's no body cam. There's no recordings. There's no notes. There's no photographs. These three people just stood in the room. Then we get to, let's see here, June 29th, and the defendant's third motion to compel discovery. And again, this has to do with Ann Taylor wanting that genetic genealogy, everything to do with DNA. And then last but not least, we get to, I'm sorry, that was, here it is, June 22nd. And this is when you knew that Ann Taylor meant business. Ann Taylor did a declaration in support of defendant's third motion to compel. And this is where she says that counsel for Mr. Colbert filed a specific request for discovery related to the DNA in this case titled defendant's third supplemental request for discovery. The state filed a specific response to that request after reviewing the materials provided. The following remains to be discovered. Request 3. profiles uploaded to a DNA database. So let's get this straight, guys. Murder is November. We have December, January, February, March, April, May, and now here we are, June 22nd. Okay. Seven and a half months after the murder. Request 3. Profiles uploaded to a DNA database. The state has provided information related to this request for the seized item, the knife sheath only. Only. What's the big daddy that this is all about? This is your big defendant's Frank, defendant's motion to suppress the IGG. Well, why? Because everything stems from this. And then even if they don't get it that way, there's still other routes to get the suppression. But the defense has requested all DNA profiles, including 3 additional unidentified male DNA profiles developed during the course of law enforcement's investigation. This information has not been supplied. How is this possible? Remember, he was supposed to have a preliminary hearing. They go seek a grand jury. Okay. Then we get to hear Bill Thompson screaming from the rooftop saying, it doesn't exist. Da, 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 da. Okay. Awesome, Bill. Request 6. So that was request 3. So request 6 is communications. The state has not provided all emails, text messages, electronic messages, or other messages and conversations regarding biological testing in this investigation. Why would you need this and want this? Because there has to be communication of, if I'm going to halt the Idaho State Police lab from working the IGG, right? Because we're going to actually have the FBI do it, right? You think that that happened how? Emails. You're emailing people. You're setting stuff up for testing. All of, like, we're asking these questions to see how you investigated this case, and you continue to hide the way that you investigated this case, which is how you got to my client. Why? What are you doing? Request 9 and 10. Unexpected results and corrective actions. This request has been partially complied with. However, the request lacks the full scope of the request. They want 6 months before and 6 months after testing related to the investigation. Further information related to all lab personnel has not been provided. They want to know who worked on the items. Why would you want to know that? I don't know, for contamination purposes, for a lot of reasons. Who's the dipshits that worked on this if there is a mistake, or how often do they make mistakes? Like, who's anybody that's doing anything with all the biological samples? Part of the third supplemental discovery was for materials related to genealogy testing. Okay, you guys, this has been asked for from May of 2023. This is this big declaration that has to do with the big motion to compel. And here's Ann Taylor saying she let the cat out of the bag once Brian Kober was arrested, or I'm sorry, not arrested, but indicted by a grand jury. Okay, there was no reason then to keep anything close to the vest with how you were going to defend him at that preliminary hearing. And right after they found out that they went to your grand jury, then Ann Taylor is hitting them with all of this stuff. Okay. The state has objected to this request in its entirety and has filed a motion for a protective order. Counsel for Mr. Kober requests this court consider the contemporaneous objection to the state's motion and declarations in support of the motion to compel. The requested discovery is properly sought pursuant to Idaho Criminal Rule 16. This discovery is necessary to prepare or in preparation of Mr. Kober's defense. Counsel for Mr. Kober has received the material provided in this case regarding the DNA testing, laboratory reports, bench notes, and photographs. Further, experts in the field of genealogy and DNA have consulted and offered information and guidance. The state acknowledges it used genealogy testing in this case, but claims it did not have to produce the records in the specific request for discovery. The defense disagrees. The state finally, admitted, yeah, we used IgG. Come to find out, here we are all this time later, and guess how this was used? IgG was used out the rip before anything else. How is that protocol? How is that procedure? Well, guess what? It's usually not. So, and then why wouldn't you do it with the 3 other samples? Why wouldn't you think that those 3 samples could possibly be, have something to do with this heinous crime? Counsel has learned through consultation with experts and sources referenced below that the use of genealogy databases does not necessarily lead to a single individual as a potential suspect, and that the reports of these searches often reference multiple individuals for further investigation and DNA testing. Because once you name somebody, what you're supposed to do is go get their DNA and then you test it against your sample. That's why Ann Taylor wanted to know the samples that were being tested. Because if you're going to try to clear out these unknown DNAs that were at the crime scene, right? You get samples of people and then you're, okay, hey, so this belongs to Bethany. This is Dylan. Okay. Here's everybody in our database in case anybody had touched anything, that was mine. In the Delphi case, there was unknown female DNA. And out of the hundreds of samples, only 1 or 2 were females that they ever compared. And yet there was an unknown female DNA profile there. And yet they're not going and getting anybody's DNA to compare it to, eliminate them. Again, this is where everything, when everyone's going to say oh, what's the defense up to now? Or no, the defense has been on this since day one saying we need all this shit. The prosecution has not provided any of it. Then when they had to, at the last couple of hearings, that's when the cookie crumbled. Cyree was on the stand. Before that, Payne was on the stand. Before that, Maury was on the stand. And just literally the state's case, in my opinion, crumbled in terms of that, holy shit, these guys lied. These guys lied in an affidavit to get warrants. They just made shit up. They excluded data in order to quote unquote say that, yeah, this is how the phone traveled. Are you kidding me? Why? Why would you need to do that? Because remember, they were working backwards. They had a name and they're like, make it, here you go. Here's your name. You can't tell anybody that you can't say where it came from, but here's the name and work yourself backwards. And that's exactly how this case went. But then you have to ask yourself, truly, where did the name Brian Kober come from? I've talked to one of the best in IgG, and there is no way that somebody that's working it the right way, the way that they would have been trained, would ever be giving up a name without what you call as testing your work, proving your work. In the way that you would have to prove your work before you could ever give up that name to the law enforcement agency that you are helping out and working with, is you have, what you're supposed to do is, you're going through obituaries, you're going through social media, you're building this family tree, and then here, okay, you got a couple names. Then you need to go and you need to get that person's DNA. So if the name Brian Kohlberger came up, you would go and get Brian Kohlberger's DNA. And then you would test Brian Kohlberger's DNA to your sample, to what you have. That's how you prove your work. You would never go and obtain trash from a house that has a bunch of family members there, and then you're going, you test, you start swabbing things to see where you can get this, and then you're getting a profile off of that, and then you do what? That is just not how you do it. That's not how you're trained. So think about that. And now if you were to ask Indiana would say we don't do this. We would never do this. So in fact, the state acknowledges such in its motion for a protective order. The reason they want this protective order is because it acknowledged that hundreds of relatives, so page number 5 of the motion of the protective order, the testing conducted by, a private lab is completely different in nature than the testing done by a forensic lab. Genetic genealogy labs do not generate a profile in the same way that forensic labs do, and there cannot be a direct comparison between the data obtained in this case by the Idaho State Forensic Crime Lab and the private lab. The tests used by private labs are either SNP or whole sequencing. These tests are similar to the methods used by commercial services such as 23andMe and Ancestry.com. Based upon information from experts in the field, I have learned that once a genetic genealogy profile is created and the testing by the private lab is completed, the profile is uploaded to a database that contains similar data from other individuals. Once the genetic genealogy profile is uploaded, the profile is compared within the database and relatives are identified. It is my understanding, remember this is Ann Taylor's declaration, it is my understanding that once possible relatives have been identified, their identities are used to construct a family tree. Now here's my question. What if IgG was never truly used, but it was used as a cover? Because what you are supposed to produce, if you do genetic genealogy testing, is that there's a receipt. Because you have to pay when you upload law enforcement kits. You have to pay, and you document it. And so there would be receipts of all of this. Again, this process leads to a pool of individuals rather than one specific individual. So how could you just give the name up Brian Kohlberger? The process used in this method of identification may become extremely important to Mr. Kohlberger's defense. The timing and steps utilized are extremely important to Mr. Kohlberger's case, investigation, and defense. This is nothing new. This has been a battle, and Ann Taylor won some pretty big battles because guess what their argument was? This is the case right here. This is the case when it says, without IGG, there is no case against Brian Kohlberger. This is fact. There is no request for his phone records, surveillance of his parents' home, no DNA taken from the garbage on his driveway in a gated community under a garbage collection ordinance. Because the IGG analysis is the origin of this matter, everything in the affidavit should be bye-bye. And that's what you see repetitively in here. And so to say that you didn't use, because remember the big argument here is we didn't use IGG. Well, then what came first? What came first? How did you get to Brian Kohlberger if you didn't use IGG? That's why they wanted to know all the dates of all of these search warrants. That's why they wanted to know all the dates of the subpoenas for the grand jury. They wanted to know the dates of the actions of your movements. Moscow Police Department, Idaho State Police, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We want the dates of when you did shit. Why is that so hard to understand? It's not. But why is Ashley Jennings playing stupid? She's not stupid. She's pregnant, but she's not dumb. And then this is the icing on the cake for me. I have reviewed a copy of the Idaho State Police announcement dated July 28, 2021. Okay. That the Idaho State Police Forensic Service Laboratory secured a grant to fund genetic genealogy testing for unsolved Idaho cases. See attached. Ta-da! July 28, 2021. The Idaho State Police Forensic Service Laboratory is extremely excited to announce that we have secured this grant to fund genetic genealogy testing and searching of unsolved Idaho cases. Why would the FBI need to do a damn thing? The cases we are starting with are unsolved homicide, sexual assault, and missing person and unidentified remains cases. You guys, this is supposed to be used for cold cases. This is supposed to be used to identify people, their remains. I mean, this is a last resort. Then this is the interim policy. And when I went through this, I want to just highlight again because I did a live about it, but I want to remind everybody of something that's very, very important. Okay. And I want to show you guys how, here we go. Here we go. I want to show you how involved the prosecutor is. Okay. I want to show you how involved the prosecutor is. Remember I did a live and I said, Bill Thompson, you have a lot to explain. I would have you as a witness. After consulting with the DLO, the investigative agency shall contact the prosecutor. The investigative agency shall advise the prosecutor of the nature and status of the investigation, the results of the DLO's evaluation of the candidate forensic sample, and any reasonable scientific alternatives to FGGS, this is the forensic genetic genealogy provided to the DLO. Now, right here, you could see on number 20, when you read 20, as used in this interim policy, the term prosecutor refers as applicable to the Assistant Attorney General, United States Attorney, state or local prosecuting attorneys. So that would be Bill Thompson, okay? With the jurisdiction of either the crime under investigation or the location where the unidentified human remains were discovered. You are working so closely with the prosecutor when you are using genetic genealogy that Bill Thompson, no wonder why he said he would send his kid, okay, to school to Moscow, Idaho. And then he says, well, I know a lot more. Yeah, would you know, Bill? Would you know? And let me tell you when Bill did those interviews, November 28th through November 30th. He went on a world tour. Okay? There's not a doubt in my mind that Bill Thompson was well aware. They went into a CVS in Pennsylvania, the feds followed Brian Kober into a CVS on December 16, 2022. How do I know that? Well, because it's in the motions to suppress. Okay. They were following Brian Kober for weeks. Weeks. This is when he is saying, and then what happens December 1st through 3rd? The Gonsalveses are saying, why aren't we use this, basically use genetic testing? It's 2024. Investigative agencies shall identify themselves as law enforcement to GGG services. You guys see that? That didn't happen. The investigative agency shall, if possible, configure service site user settings that control access to FGG profile data and associated account information in a manner that will prevent it from being viewed by other service users. An investigative agency must seek informed consent from third parties before collecting reference samples that will be used for FGG. The best part about it is that when you go through this, it keeps on just talking about that, that you are to be up, at every turn, you're talking to the prosecutor. FGG is a law enforcement technique used to generate investigative leads. Investigative agencies shall not arrest a suspect based solely on genetic association generated by a GGG service. Traditional genealogy research and other investigative work is required to determine the true nature of any genetic association. If a suspect is arrested and charged with a criminal offense while FGG is in progress, the investigative agency shall promptly contact the relevant vendor laboratory or DTC service and direct that all testing cease at a point in time when the forensic or reference sample can be preserved. The investigative agency shall also request that the sample extract and be returned directly to the submitting law enforcement agencies or custodial CODIS laboratory as applicable. The investigative agency shall document its request and compliance by the vendor laboratory or DTC service. If a suspect is arrested and charged with a criminal offense after an FGG profile has been entered into one or more DTC services, the investigative agency shall make a prompt formal request that all FGG profiles and associated account information and data held by such service be removed from its records. So that's what they did. But listen to what, so when Bill Thompson says, we followed DOJ, we followed it and they deleted it out of there like they were supposed to. Yeah, but guess what? Guess what you forgot? Yeah. So you want to do all that, but guess what? The investigative agency shall document its request and compliance to the DOC services. All FGG profiles, account information, and data shall be retained by the investigative agency for potential use during prosecution and subsequent judicial proceedings, you fucks. If a suspect is arrested and charged with a criminal offense after FGG profile has been entered into an open data personal DNA database, the investigative agency shall promptly remove the FGG profile and all associated account information and data from the database. The investigative agency shall document the removal of the information and data. And it shall be retained by the investigative agency for potential use during prosecution. Only after an order. Ready? So subject to applicable law here, but in all cases that result in a criminal prosecution, reference samples obtained from third parties, and then all derivative FGG profiles and all of the GGG services account information, all that stuff, data shall be destroyed by the investigative agency only after the entry of an appropriate judicial order. So if you're doing all of this and using all of this, why aren't you just following protocol and just documenting it like it says? And the only thing that I can think of is that it's one of two reasons why you wouldn't do this. And it says, well, did you really use IgG? Okay. Did you really use it? Number one. And number two, did you use it ethically? But what does that matter? You know? Is it because you realize that when you uploaded it, that holy shit, you got a hell of a hit because Brian Kober already uploaded it to that site, which means that in fact you would have used his genetic information to get your hit. So when it says here, this is what, when I realized that it was, when I realized this wording here, I'll share it and then I'll be done. But that Brian Kober's, this is the genetic information one. It's that, you know, he moves to suppress all evidence illegally gathered by law enforcement using his genetic information, not his DNA, you know, his genetic information. And so then it's going to come down to, well, does he have, I would just think that if there's any way possible that there's a hit that's just so substantial where it's going to come to, does he have the privacy? But I think it might even be worse. They can't even prove that they used IgG. You know, once you would have, let me ask you a question. Once you would have outed out the bag that you used IgG, here you go. Yep, this is how we made our tree. What's the problem? If everybody out there saying that nobody's rights were violated, right? If nobody's rights were violated here, right? And this isn't a big deal, then why did the government for months, for actually 1.5 years, okay, since we're getting into 2 years actually, when Ann Taylor started asking for all this discovery, and they're just lying about it all. Like, they're not turning it over. They have the shit and they're not turning it over. Why? Because they know what they're turning over is trash. It doesn't make sense any other way. You guys, they caught the Golden State Killer unethically. Okay? What's the problem here? I don't want somebody that murdered 4 students to be out on the street. What's the problem here? Is it because you guys were so sloppy that not only did you unethically do all of this, but then you just thought to yourself, well, let's pad the stats and let's just fucking put the cast shit to match this little route? Is that what we're going to start getting into? Is that this is when you just said, well, hey, we know he's guilty as sin, but let's just fucking pad the stats. And you guys got caught. And now a killer's going to go free because, like I've been thinking what's been going on for a long time in our country is that law enforcement every single day does this type of shit. And actually innocent people are railroaded. But here it's no different. You tried to railroad somebody and yeah, they're like, let's say that they're guilty, but I've seen you do it to innocent people. And this is why integrity matters. This is why ethics matter. This is why rules and laws matter. Not just for the United States citizen, but for those that are enforcing the laws, the rules. The government doesn't get to pick and choose when they get to do fuckerage. Sorry, this is about our rights. Like, this shit has no place, because then what do? You have no faith in the system. But then you got Ann Taylor and company saying, listen, our client is innocent. Our client is innocent. Wouldn't you think your client was innocent too? If you saw that, oh my God, they framed this motherfucker. That's what it's looking like, right? Because you guys had to do all of this. Why do you need to do all of this? It's because none of your hits were coming back as hits. You weren't able to say that he was following any of the students. You weren't able to say that there was any DNA in the car. You weren't able to say that there was any DNA at the parents' house or his apartment. There is no linking him. And then we're supposed to believe that sheath wasn't planted, when all of this other stuff does not equal, like, there's nothing there. Lana, they're violating our rights, his rights, their rights, oath. It's sick. It's absolutely sick. It's absolutely sick. But what's even like, did you guys do all this because the University of Idaho could not? Did you do this for money? Was this about money? Was this about enrollment dropping? And we cannot have this, and we need to have an arrest before those kids come back to school. I mean, this is the sloppiest work I've seen since the Sheldon Jeter Jr. case. And then Ann's team makes a great point. Well, this was been going on. All of your officers couldn't have known that you guys were all doing this, right? So who was looking into the frats? And who was looking into the sororities? And who was going through all the search warrants that y'all guys were filing with all the, the Snapchats and the Facebooks and the all these phones and then the financials? Who's paying for all those nice outfits that all those kids are wearing? Who's paying? Where are they getting all this money from? Why would anybody need to do any of this stuff if Brian Kober is so guilty? There's no such thing as committing the perfect crime anymore because of the world that we live in with digitals. So I have a question. If you guys could slay him up with the digitals, right? Then how could Cy Ray not exonerate him with the digitals if he can place him somewhere else at the time that you guys say that crime was committed? The IGG might not hold up because Hippler wants to be whatever, but I'll tell you what is going to hold up. And that's going to be the fact that these officers lied, flat out lied with the cast, with the CSL AT&T. Lied. They padded the stats. And that's the arrest warrant. That's where the remember I said in the beginning, I said, why did they take his DNA twice? Why did they take his DNA twice? Did they take it to see if maybe it would hold up going through a different route with a warrant? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But I'm just thinking to myself that I don't know why you would need his. I don't care that if it's in different states, you're putting it into what, I mean, that's like saying we collected his dad's DNA from the trash, but we're sending it to a different state. Like, we have to go get his dad's DNA from like Idaho now. Like, no. I'm just curious if it was a way to like have a different warrant be used to get his DNA. Should one of these be tossed? So we would have to ask ourselves what warrant, what PCA was used to obtain certain things. But I think it's all trash. Trash in, trash out. And I, for the life of me, can't believe that you're following Brian Kober this whole time and you're not able to get, you're telling me he has an office at WSU. You're telling me he grades papers. He didn't discard anything that you could have gotten his DNA when he was in Washington or Idaho. And they're going to say, we didn't know about Brian Kober yet. We didn't know about Brian Kober yet. And I'm going to say, you think I believe that shit? That may have sold before you guys let it out the bag about IGG. But I knew that there's no way. I said it day one, I said, how in the world did you get to this guy? Thank you guys so much for joining in. And, but this should have taken you guys all back down memory lane. And that this is nothing new. We were just waiting for this to be filed. We knew that it was coming. And I hopefully took you guys back through these discovery motions that were filed repetitively that were clearly being avoided like the plague or lied about. So nobody wants somebody that killed 4 people to go free. But you want me to believe that you have the right guy and you did all of this? I would think that you guys are inept. And I wouldn't trust you. And I think that people like this should be fired. Because if this was my profession, I would never want to stand next to you. I would never back this type of work. And I would think that you are a piece of shit. And if I was a parent of one of those kids, I would sue the fucking shit out of you. Good night.
This is what the other group had that ran away.
Oh, really? Just ditched it? Awesome.
Yeah, those ones kept walking in the car. And the other one,
It's truly for the win.
That I was given to. So there was 2 different discs. Okay? They all knew about it.
We're not here to talk about the alcohol stuff, okay?
Okay, yeah.
But this is the second noise complaint we've had here tonight within 2 hours.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Is this your place?
Yeah.
Perfect. You know why we're here?
And I see noise.
Noise, yeah.
Yeah.
Big speaker right there.
Yeah.
Nothing against having a party. Once neighbors start calling in, then we have an issue.
Like brains, and like if you need a lot of brains, you're gonna be